So in this next video, what I want you to see is that although if I try to select any one part of this, right, you see how this can be pinned and unpinned. If it's pinned, I can't move this around. But if I click it and unpin, um, I could probably move this around. See that? How I can move it and move it again from its origin. I don't necessarily need to do that, so I'm going to undo it. But I just want you to know you can move this around in that view by pinning and unpinning it, okay? So first things first, if I want to make this an actual Revit file, basically I'm tracing over this. And so today what we're learning how to do is to do a fairly decent job of tracing something in Revit, but not just with line work, but with some line work and some detail items. When to use line work, when to use a detail item. Well, first things first, if I want my structural member here, this bent column, right? And for those of you who aren't aware, if we have a lot of columns that are straight, but if I put in this term bent column, right? A bent column under images is a column that looks more um, kind of, oh, that's not a great picture of it. I should have downloaded one earlier. Let me see if I can find one. Let me see if I call it an angle column. Uh, or let me see if this works a little better. Yeah. So this is the kind of column, and you've probably seen it before in a building like this. You see this large column back here, right? There's one example of it. And there's probably several other ones I could pull up and show you too, but I just wanted you to kind of see what we're looking at in this picture, which is more like that bent column like we were looking at in this very first image, like here or here. These kind of columns that are like a column and a beam combined, okay? So that's kind of what we're looking at right here. So the first things first, if I want to start drawing this, if I click on the detail line feature, and remember a detail line is a line that only shows up in a particular view. It will not show up in the 3D view, and obviously this is a 3D view. I can go in here and say, I want to use thin lines or medium lines for this column. So when I click here, I have an option to either draw a line like you're seeing there, or I can say pick lines. So obviously in this instance, if I click here and go pick, 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 and I pick here, and then I pick here, and then in this instance, I can even say, let's do this again. I can say pick lines, and I can come in here and say, let's pick, it really doesn't matter too much, but I'm going to say, let's pick that line too, right? And I think I've already picked that line. Now, instead of selecting and getting all that, now I have some actual line work in here, right? Some places where I've picked lines, and so I actually have lines, right? Second thing is I don't want to pick lines. It'd be very tedious to pick lines with like this metal deck. So how could I do something like that? Well, let's go in and see. Let's go into insert and say load family. And under load family, I want to go right for detail items. And under detail items, under metals, I'm like, oh wait, hey, here's some steel decking. And I can say that this is a roof decking in section or on the side. I've got composite decking sections as well, non-composite decking. I'm going to go for roof decking. And I'm just going to click open. And now that I've got that, wow, where do I go get that from? Well, under families, if you click under here in detail items, now there is a roofing deck section that we can grab. And look how many different sizes we have, right? And so if I was going to use this one, I would say this is probably an 18 gauge, 1.5 inch deck. So I'm going to drag this out here. And look what I can do. If I now hit the space bar on my keyboard, I've got a piece of decking, but it doesn't quite look like that one, does it? Let's see if there's any other ones in there that we can use. Okay, so what if I grab this 3 DR16? What does that look like? Well, that was a little deeper, but that wasn't quite what I was looking for. How about a 1-inch deck, right? It's a little different. Eh, let's look at a couple of different ones like this and see if we can find what we're looking for. You see, that's obviously a wide one. This one, these are too deep, right? And they're not the same shape. So how could we handle this in this situation? Well, let's look and see if one of the other shapes that we saw out here. Um, so let's see non-composite decking, if it's a little different because it's not composite, right? So here's a few other options that we have. That's a little small. That's a little better. Let's see if this 2-inch works. That's a little too much. I want to pause the video and talk about something for a moment. So what we discovered here is that our decking that we could use would be this 1.5 18 gauge. And let's see if there's a difference. There's the 1.5 18 gauge, 1.5 20 gauge. They look the exact same, but if we were to measure them, and I don't know if this will let us measure them ever so slightly. See how that measures a 16th? And this will probably measure a 16th too, just because my units are not as precise. And where do we change units if we wanted to? We're not going to here, but under here we could go to project units, and you can see how under length, you see I can round to the nearest 32nd. I can go all the way down to the nearest 1/256, but I don't need to do that because in this architectural detail, all I'm worried about really is what? I'm just worried about the way this looks, right? I'm not worried about getting it measured to the 256th of an inch. That's not important here. The next thing you'll see though, when it comes to this, is how do we place this properly in here? Well, what I'm going to do first is align to here that, right? So that's a line to there. I didn't even have to rotate it. And then I can grab that and I can say move from its midpoint here to, and I can hit SM on the keyboard, snap middle. Up, can't really find that snap middle there because it's what, 2 pieces. So what can I do? Guess what I can do? I can come in here to annotate and say detail line. I can draw a detail line from here to here. I can snap to this end, all right? And now when I go in here, I can say move from this midpoint here to SM, snap mid. Whoops, let me try that again. It can be a little tricky sometimes. From that midpoint to SM, snap mid to there. And now that's basically what I'm looking for. It doesn't need to be perfect, people. Now I can go in and see how I can go in and edit the family and change this a little. I don't need to do that. I'm not asking you to do that. And this doesn't need to be perfect, right? So don't worry about editing this family. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to make a decision here. The detail has it that wide. Mine, if I came in here and I changed it to a 20, a 24 or a 26, would that matter, right? No, because again, that's just the gauge or the thickness of the deck. So in this instance, I'm just going to make a decision. I'm going to say I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to copy it. Actually, first thing I'm going to do is just, yeah, I'm going to copy this, right, from this endpoint here to this endpoint right here, right? So now I've got that copy in there. And now I didn't have to pick all those other lines. Now I can grab this and I can say, copy this from here to here, right? And I can click multiple to here and all the way down my decking, right? Which maybe seems like a lot, but it really isn't a lot. I can copy this down, right? And, you know, I'll take the time and do that. It's no big deal. And again, it doesn't have to, in this instance, with a detail item, match up perfectly. We're not trying to, because after this is all over, that link is going to go away anyway. So it's really not going to matter how perfectly lined up with it is. It is a detail view, okay? So here we're covered there, and then we have about a half of a unit there. So we'll figure out what to do with that in the next video when we come back, when we start placing some of the other items. But basically, getting that item in here, that non-composite decking section, is your next step in this video and getting that copied in there, okay? And if we were to make this link go away right quick, like if I clicked on here and right clicked and said hide and view elements, right? Now my detail view is starting to take shape. If you can see what I'm got going there. So you can see this is a tedious task, but it's something as a Revit technician or an operator that you're going to need to know how to do. And so we're going to work through some of these together so we know how and where to find some of these elements, because sometimes we'll have an element to use, but in other instances we may not, and we may have to actually use the line work based on what's there, okay? So I'll go ahead and stop this video and we'll pick back up in the next one in a few minutes.